It was a Thursday evening in early October, one of those gray, moody nights in the suburbs outside Philly, where it feels like the sky forgot how to do anything but sulk. I just gotten home from work, tired, sore from a long shift, and halfway through kicking off my boots when Sarah hit me with it. No hello. No, how was your day? Just that tone in her voice, the one that always meant she was about to draw the line, as she liked to call it. We need to talk, she said, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed like some kind of final boss. I already knew what this was. We've been doing this same dance for years, me walking on eggshells, her throwing out ultimatums like confetti. And I'd always played along. Apologized, promised to do better, offered up my pride like a peace offering in exchange for a few weeks of calm. But something shifted in me that night. I don't know if it was the exhaustion, the quiet realization that nothing I did ever made her happy, or maybe I'd just finally run out of energy to care. Whatever it was, I looked at her, not through her, not with fear, but at her. Really saw her. And all I could think was, I'm done. She started in about how I didn't support her dreams, how I wasn't emotionally available, how she felt like she was the only one trying in our marriage. Classic script. I stood there, letting her go through the whole monologue, waiting for that moment she'd pause and expect me to jump in, to beg, to fix things, to reassure her that she was right and I was broken. But I didn't. Instead, I said, okay. Just that. One word. No emotion behind it. No panic. No pleading. She blinked, clearly thrown off. Okay. She repeated like she didn't hear me right. Yeah, I said. If that's how you feel, I'm not going to argue anymore. She kept waiting for the old version of me to show up. The one who'd bend over backwards to prove my love, to crawl through glass to get back in her good graces. But he was gone. I think he died a slow death over the years, bled out from 1,000 little cuts. Every cold shoulder, every passive-aggressive comment, every time she made me feel like loving her meant losing pieces of myself. I walked past her, grabbed my keys, and left the house without another word. No yelling, no door slamming, just silence. I drove around aimlessly for a while, no destination in mind, just me and the quiet hum of the road. I pulled into a 24-hour diner eventually, sat at the counter with a cup of black coffee, and stared at the rain sliding down the window. For the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace. I didn't text her, didn't check in. I knew she was probably pacing the living room, waiting for the next act in a usual drama to start. She thought I'd come crawling back like always, asking how we could fix it, trying to smooth over the cracks. But I didn't, because I finally saw the truth. It wasn't about fixing us. It was about fixing me. I'd built my life around her moods, her approval, her endless checklist of things I had to be in order to be enough. And I was tired. Not just physically, soul tired. The next morning, I hit the gym. Not for some revenge body transformation or any of that nonsense. I just needed to feel strong again. Needed to do something for me for once. The soreness that came after that first workout, it was the best pain I'd felt in years. It reminded me I still had a body, still had control over something. Day by day, I started taking small pieces of myself back. Reached out to old friends I hadn't seen since Sarah started freezing them out. Bought new clothes, not because she liked them, but because I did. I stopped trying to read her mind, stopped trying to manage her moods like some kind of emotional air traffic controller. And that's when the silence really started to eat at her. She didn't know what to do with a version of me that didn't flinch, didn't chase, didn't dance to her rhythm anymore. That was the beginning of the end and the beginning of me. The first few days after I stopped playing her game were eerily quiet. No yelling, no crying, no slammed doors. Just this stillness in the house that felt unfamiliar, but not in a bad way. More like when a storm finally passes and everything's soaked and broken, but the air is clear for the first time in ages. Sarah didn't say much. I think she was in shock. She kept walking around the house like a ghost, waiting for the next fight to start, probably assuming I was just bottling it all up and would explode eventually. But there was no explosion coming, just distance. I started waking up earlier, making coffee, and heading to the gym while she was still asleep. Some mornings she'd come downstairs as I was leaving, still in her robe, eyes half shut and confused. She didn't ask where I was going, probably because she didn't know how to talk to this version of me. the one who wasn't clinging to her anymore. She tried to test the waters a few times. Little things at first, like the night she made dinner and set the table for two, pretending like nothing had happened. I sat down, ate in silence, said thank you, and then went into the other room. No argument, no icy sarcasm, just nothing. That nothing spoke louder than any shouting match we'd ever had. That's when the comments started. "You've been really quiet lately," she said one night, pretending like she was concerned. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah," I said without looking up from my book. "I'm good." She blinked at me, like I'd given the wrong answer to a test. She didn't know what to do with that. And I wasn't trying to be cruel. I wasn't giving her the silent treatment out of spite. I was just done. There's a kind of silence that's passive-aggressive, and then there's the kind that's born from finally being at peace. I wasn't withholding myself as punishment. I was just no longer offering myself up as a sacrifice. She started hovering more, tried to insert herself into my routine. "You've been hitting the gym a lot lately," she said one morning, trying to sound casual. "What's that about?" I shrugged. "Just something I want to do for myself." That answer didn't sit well with her. Sarah had always wanted me to improve myself, but only in the ways that made her feel more secure. If I started dressing better, she'd ask if I was trying to impress someone. If I started losing weight, she'd act suspicious instead of supportive. I think she liked the idea of me being stuck, safe, predictable, and easy to control. So when I started to slip out of that version of myself, she noticed, and it scared her. The next tactic was guilt. "You've been distant," she said one night, standing in the doorway of the bedroom while I scrolled through my phone on the couch. "I feel like you're punishing me." I looked up at her. She was wearing one of the old t-shirts I used to love on her. Barefoot, hair up, trying to look soft and approachable. The Sarah I used to crave attention from. But it didn't work this time. "I'm not punishing you," I said. "I'm just not chasing anymore." She didn't respond. She just stood there, blinking like she didn't recognize me. And maybe she didn't. Because the version of me who used to beg, who used to ask what was wrong and how to fix it, that guy was gone. After that, she started pushing more. Passive-aggressive digs. Little jabs about how I'd suddenly become so selfish. Accusations that I was emotionally unavailable or checked out. I didn't rise to it. I didn't feed the fire. I nod, maybe say, "I hear you," and move on. That drove her crazy. One night, she finally snapped. "This is emotional abuse," she said, arms folded across her chest. "You're punishing me with indifference." "It's cruel, Mark." I just stared at her for a long moment, letting the weight of her words hang in the air. "No," I said quietly. "It's just peace. You're mistaking peace for punishment because you're used to chaos." That shut her up. She left the room after that, and for once, I didn't follow. I didn't try to fix it. I didn't feel the need to explain myself or win her over. I just sat there and let the silence settle back in, like a blanket I'd finally wrapped around myself after years of freezing cold. By the end of that week, we were like two strangers living in the same house. She kept trying to poke holes in my calm, trying to provoke a reaction, but I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally understood something vital. I wasn't the problem. I wasn't the one who needed to change to keep this relationship alive. I had already spent years shrinking myself, bending over backwards, trying to love her better, so maybe she'd finally be happy. But no amount of effort could fix a person who only felt powerful when they were needed more than they needed back. And when that realization hit me fully, I wasn't sad. I wasn't even angry. I was free. By the time fall started to settle in for real, leaves turning and cold creeping into the mornings, I'd fully stopped caring about how Sarah felt about me. It sounds harsh, I know, but after years of bending to her moods, her silence, her rules, there was something deeply liberating about just not giving a damn anymore. And with that shift in mindset came something else, momentum. I wasn't just tolerating life anymore. I started living it. I signed up for personal training at the gym instead of just fumbling around on my own. I shaved off 10 pounds in a month, then 15. I started buying clothes that actually fit me instead of whatever Sarah thought I looked respectable in. New shoes, new watch. Hell, I even got a fresh haircut from a place that offered bourbon while you waited, not some discount chain where you felt like cattle. I ran into an old friend from high school, Ben at a coffee shop one afternoon. We hadn't talked in years, mostly because Sarah never liked him. Said he was immature, drank too much, and didn't match our lifestyle. Translation, he didn't kiss her ass. We talked for almost an hour. Laughed more than I had in months. That night, he added me to a group chat with some of our old crew, and it felt like cracking open a time capsule from a version of myself I thought had died years ago. We started grabbing beers on Fridays. Nothing wild. Just guys catching up, talking about real stuff, jobs, relationships, regrets. I didn't tell them everything about what was happening at home, but I gave them enough. Ben just nodded and said, "About damn time, man." Meanwhile, Sarah watched it all from across the room like someone watching a mirror crack in slow motion. She didn't say much at first, just little comments here and there. "New shirt?" she asked once, eyeing me like I was a stranger. "Yeah," I said. "Picked it up last week." She tilted her head. "Didn't think that was your style." I shrugged. Tastes change. Another night, she looked at me across the dinner table and said, "You've been different lately." That one hung in the air a while. I didn't look up from my plate. "Better or worse?" I asked. She didn't answer, just kept eating. That's when I realized something. She didn't want me happy. She wanted me manageable. The more I grew, the more I peeled away the layers she'd built around me. And every time I chose myself, my health, my time, my happiness, it chipped away at the power she once held so tightly. But instead of trying to reach me with vulnerability or honesty, she tried manipulation. She'd drop little landmines and wait to see if I'd step on them. "I saw you smiling at that barista the other day," she said once, like it was a casual observation. "Oh yeah," I said, not even blinking. "She's got good energy." She blinked, not used to me throwing the ball back without shame or guilt. Another night, when I mentioned I was heading out for drinks with Ben, she said, "You're out more than you're in lately. Are you even part of this marriage anymore?" And I remember laughing, actually laughing, because it was the first time in years she even called it a marriage without also weaponizing it. "That's rich," I said, grabbing my keys. "Ask yourself that question sometime." She didn't have a comeback for that. It wasn't just about getting stronger or seeing muscles I hadn't seen since college. It was the mental part, the clarity, the realization that I didn't need to explain myself anymore, that my existence didn't require her sign-off. I stopped checking in, stopped asking permission, started making plans for my future that didn't involve waiting for her to decide whether I deserved kindness or not that day. And slowly, people started noticing. My coworkers, guys who used to think I was just the guy who worked late and ducked out of happy hours, started inviting me out. One of them even asked if I was seeing someone new. I wasn't, not yet. But it hit me then. I didn't feel broken anymore. Just open. Free. Sarah, on the other hand, started spiraling. Not in big ways, but in subtle ones. She'd hover in the kitchen when I was on the phone. She started wearing makeup to sit on the couch. She cooked more often, made my favorite meals, even started asking how my workouts were going. It was weird, like watching someone try to re-enter your life using all the tricks that used to work, but realizing the door had already been locked from the inside. And that was the wildest part of it all. I didn't hate her. I wasn't out for revenge. I wasn't trying to win. I just no longer needed her approval to breathe. And she didn't know what to do with a version of me that couldn't be guilt or gaslight back into place. There was a quiet power in that, a stillness I'd earned the hard way. I didn't know exactly what was coming next, but I didn't know this. She couldn't control me anymore. Not with her silence, not with her tears, not with her twisted idea of love. And she knew it. There's no perfect moment to end a marriage. No cue from the universe, no trumpet sounding off in the background. Sometimes it's just a quiet morning, a half-empty coffee mug, and a decision that's been years in the making finally finding its voice. For me, that moment came on a Sunday. Sarah was sitting on the porch, scrolling through her phone, pretending not to care, while watching me from the corner of her eye. I'd just come back from the gym. I walked into the kitchen, grabbed a bottle of water, and stood there for a second, staring at the floor. And then I just said it. "I'm filing." She didn't look up at first, just kept scrolling. Maybe she didn't hear me, or maybe she did and hoped ignoring it would make it go away. I repeated, "I'm filing for divorce." This time, her head snapped up. Her mouth opened like she had something prepared, something she'd rehearsed, but nothing came out. She just stared at me, like she didn't believe it. "Is this about someone else?" she asked finally, her voice brittle. I almost laughed. That was her go-to. If I was happy and it wasn't because of her, then clearly there had to be another woman. "No," I said. "This is about me. About finally being done with whatever this is." Her eyes welled up, but I didn't flinch. They used to be my breaking point, the tears. They'd pull me right back into her orbit every time. But this time, nothing. I felt clear, resolved. She tried to pivot, like she always did when her usual tactics didn't work. "We can fix this," she said, standing now. "We can go to therapy. I can change. You just have to tell me what you need." I shook my head. "I don't need anything from you anymore. That's the point." She stood there in silence, breathing hard, like she'd just been hit in the stomach. And in a way, maybe she had. Because for the first time in years, she wasn't the one in control. She wasn't the one holding the strings. That week, I moved into a short-term apartment while the paperwork went through. Clean space, blank walls, quiet. And for the first time in forever, the silence wasn't loaded with tension. It was just peace. The gym became my second home. My friends, especially Ben, became my people again. We hit concerts, grabbed beers, watched dumb movies. They joked that I'd come back from the dead. And honestly, I had. Sarah texted me a few times during those early weeks. Some were cold and matter-of-fact. Others were full of emotion. Late-night apologies, rambling voice notes. One time she even drove to the apartment and left a letter under my door, tucked into an envelope that still smelled like her perfume. I didn't read it. Didn't need to. I'd already read that letter 100 times, just in different forms. The guilt, the promises, the tears. All of it too little, too late. When the court date came, we didn't even make eye contact. She sat on one side of the room with her lawyer. I sat on the other with mine. It was clinical, fast, efficient. Years of marriage reduced to a few signatures and legal language. But when the judge said, "Your divorce is finalized," something inside me shifted. It was over. And it wasn't sadness I felt. It wasn't even relief. It was freedom. I walked out of that courthouse alone, didn't even wait for anyone. The sun was shining. It was one of those crisp days where everything feels sharper, the sky bluer, the air cleaner. I stood on the steps for a minute, just breathing. And for the first time in years, it didn't feel like I was surviving. It felt like I was living. The months that followed were strange, kind of beautiful. I got promoted at work, started dating casually. Nothing serious, just enough to remember that I was still a human being with worth. I picked up photography again, something I hadn't touched since college. I started running, not just on the treadmill, but outside on real trails. Some mornings I'd be halfway through a 5-mile run before I even realized I'd started. It was like my body was catching up to the life my mind had already decided to reclaim. And Sarah? Well, she tried to linger. She called. She texted. She even sent messages through mutual friends. At first it was, "I miss you." Then it was, "I made a mistake." And when none of that worked, she pivoted to blame. "You gave up. You didn't fight for us." But here's the thing, I did fight. For years, I fought to keep something alive that was already on life support. I fought for her attention, her affection, her approval. And when I stopped fighting, I didn't give up. I chose myself. That was the turning point. And I never looked back.